Today we're speaking with Jim Scaptura of Watkins Glen. It's June 21st, 2021. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Glenda.
So, Jim and I are going to be chatting about the Legion Cadets. So, Jim, what were the Legion Cadets?
Well, it's a junior drum and bugle corps centered around the American Legion. Actually, probably started originally children of young men who belonged to the American Legion after World War I. I surmise that that's how it came into existence. That didn't mean that every person that isn't there had a parent in the American Legion, but that's probably how it came into existence. Also, that was a popular thing in American Legions around the country, and it was organized in Watkins Glen by Dan Sullivan, and he remained the director of that organization up until about 1950. By that time, of course, he's a World War I veteran. He'd become fairly elderly and was having a difficult time getting around. And there were some changes coming in drum corps. The corps, as it was designed originally, they had the old style drums, bugles with no valves, or it's just a traditional bugle that you would have heard at Reveille, and they played mostly songs from World War I. It's a long, long trail. Mm-hmm. It's a long way to Tipperary, right. Mm-hmm. Songs like that. And then somehow the Legion came across what was happening with drum corps, especially around the cities, big cities. Okay. And at that point, my father got involved in it, and the corps were changing, new style parade drums, horns with a single valve in it, so that they could play more complicated tunes, and corps were becoming much larger. And then they were having competitions. Of course, they'd had competitions before, but now these competitions were becoming big time. And it was decided, the Legion decided that if they were going to have a corps, it had to be in line with what was going on. So my father, I don't remember who else was involved. I was, at the time, I think I was 14 or 15 years old and wasn't paying a heck of a lot of attention to all of that. But they decided all new uniforms. And they contacted, Charlie Kress, and he located the uniforms for him. He had some kind. Of course, he was a big time politician, and he contacted this school that I guess it was closing, and he got the uniforms, the sailor suits, which set us apart from most of the other corps, because they had usually blousy upper and big shakos and things like that, and we had just the simple sailor hats. And anyway, he managed to get enough uniforms for the entire corps. And if you look at the pictures, a very sharp looking drum corps. Of course, the uniforms were wool. And we had to wear leggings. So before every parade, we we had to.
With the wrap kind?
Yeah, we had to wrap those leggings. So it was a real process. So and then Carl Isley Sr. was available, and as a drill instructor, and so he was brought on to teach. And these guys were all working for nothing.
Sure.
Those two were working for nothing, but they needed somebody to teach the modern style. And of course, the Apple Knockers, the Geneva Apple Knockers, had adopted this modern style drum corps, and so they contacted them for instructors, and they hired Frankie Farr as a bugle instructor and Norm Peth as a drum instructor. You'd had to hear these two guys because they were really extraordinary. I mean, Frankie Farr take that bugle, and he could play things that just were unbelievable. And Norm Peth, they went from whatever kind of drumming they were doing before to rudimental drumming. Mm-hmm. We had to learn all the paradiddles and the radamecues and everything else. And everything we did had to be rudimental, and everything the horns did had to be according to music, because when you were on the field, there were judges listening to you, and if you weren't doing what you were supposed to, you'd get a mark off.
Right.
And so they got a hold of the boys and started instructing them, and I can still remember our street beat. That's how good those guys were. I can't play it anymore, but I can still remember it. And some of the songs that the horn line played, I can remember that.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they just did a wonderful job of putting this corps together. And we went to. When it first started, my father was involved in that part of it, and I can't remember who else. There were 3 or 4 other guys that were involved in bringing about this change. And they went to competitions, and watching what my father was doing and what that corps was doing, I told him, I said, I want to belong. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, what do you want to play? And if I decided I wanted to play a bugle, I could have gone right into the corps. But I told him, I said, I want to play a drum. Mm-hmm. And there just weren't any openings. So I became a substitute. And we had 12 people in the drum line. And I think 30 or 36 in the horn line.
Wow.
It was a good sized horn line. And we had there were some really good guys in there who knew what they were doing. I mean, Chuck Calhoun and Carl Isley and Teddy Specchio. I mean, those guys they could play, and so it became a real high-level drum corps. Mm-hmm. And they began winning at competitions, and they went up against some pretty good corps from around the central part of New York State, and they were able to hold their own. Either, very frequently they would come in first place or second or something like that, and they did a real good job. I remember when I first got into the corps, they wanted the corps to see what the big corps were like: Riley's Raiders, Hawthorne Cavalieros, the Skyliners, Cahos Grenadiers, and Syracuse Brigadiers, and
They were
the
everywhere.
Geneva. Well, yeah, and every year, about this time of year, in Syracuse was the Northeast Pageant of the Drum, and the top corps. At that time, most of the top corps were on the Eastern Seaboard, so the top corps actually in the Northeast, Boston, New York, Philadelphia. Buffalo, Syracuse, that's where the big corps were.
And what time frame are we talking about now?
Around 1951.
Okay.
And so they wanted all of us to see these big corps, so they organized and they had a parade in Syracuse, and the cadets paraded with the big corps, which was it was a neat thing.
Pretty exciting
for them to do. At that point, I didn't get to do that. I got to go with them, but I didn't get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the competition was at night in MacArthur Stadium, and of course the place was packed, and I just I was awed by what was going on there,
Mm-hmm.
and to listen to those drum corps and what they were able to do, and it just amazed me. And after that, I think the term is I'm drum corps, and it becomes part of you,
Mm-hmm.
and it never goes away.
Yeah.
And when I get in my car, I have a CD. It's all drum corps.
My word, that's amazing.
And I listen to it over and over and over again. And you ask Patty Skimmets, and she'll tell you the same thing. You ask Judd, and they'll tell you the same thing. It just never goes. And of course, I don't want it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever there was a competition, I try to go to it because and the first time there was a big one down in Waverly, and they had the big corps from the Eastern Seaboard,
Mm-hmm.
and I always wanted to go there, and I went there every summer when they had it,
Mm-hmm.
and the first time I told my wife when we were going steady at the time, I said, I'm going down to that. I said, would you like to go? Nah. So I said, well, why don't you come? And after that, she said, when are we going to the next one? So
Jim, your father, his name?
Nick.
Nick.
Yeah.
So was your father still involved when you joined as a sub drummer?
Yes.
And then were you eventually a full-time drummer?
Yes. One of the tenor drummers quit, and so I got to take his place. And the tenor drum line was Kenny Fields and Jimmy Angelo, Larry Scott, and me.
Mm-hmm.
And of those three of us are still Larry, Kenny, and I. Unfortunately, Jimmy Angelo passed away a few years ago.
How did your father feel when you were out there?
He was, keep me out of trouble.
But he must have been pleased you were.
Oh, yes. He was a big American Legion guy. He had all the the jackets and the hat, and so he was happy.
So the competitions were in the summer?
Yes.
Did you practice year-round?
Yes. Well, yeah. Oh, yes. Practiced year-round. We practiced at the Legion, and yes, we had to practice year-round. And in the wintertime, that's when the new program was adopted. We get new songs. They tried new street beats from time to time, but the original ones we had were so good that
why change?
Why change? I mean, they were and they were devised by Norm Peth, and they were of a style that you would have heard from the Skyliners or the Riley's Raiders. Those big corps.
So where was Skyliners based?
New York City.
And Riley's Raiders?
Philadelphia.
Oh my! So you are talking wide-ranging involvement.
Well, the first time I heard the Skyliner, of course, we called them Gabarini because that was the American Legion post that they were.
Okay.
And first time I heard them, I couldn't believe what they were doing.
Because they were other teenagers like you.
No,
yeah?
no, they're senior corps.
Oh,
they were senior
corps. Oh, I
corps.
see. Okay.
But we did run. We ran into a lot of junior corps.
But the junior corps were the ones you competed
Yes.
against, right? Okay.
Well, no, we competed against senior corps as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
They mixed.
Yeah, we did. We competed, and I remember going to Canandaigua, and there were two corps from Auburn, New York, the Purple Lancers, who were really good, and another corps, which were pretty good, and we competed against them up in Canandaigua and beat them.
A senior corps.
Senior corps.
Wow, you must have been so proud.
Well, I wasn't. Yeah.
Well, they must have been.
I was.
So proud.
They were. No, I had to sit on the sidelines for that one. But they did a really good job, and they beat them. They came in first place.
So had you traveled much outside of Schuyler County before you joined or were part of with your father?
No, I was to Elmira, Auburn, and Syracuse.
Was it?
That's as far as I got.
So it must have been very exciting for you then to
we didn't
have the travel.
Yeah, we didn't go that far. My first outing was at Hornell.
Okay.
And there were several junior corps and several senior corps there for the parade, and it was a parade. It was a parade competition.
Okay.
And we had to put on a little show in front of the judges' stand. And that was my first parade, and I could not keep in step.
Oh.
God, I the little skip, and I kept doing that. And Jimmy Angelo was next to me, and he kept hollering at me. And we got done, and he said, "We're going to lose this competition because you couldn't keep in step."
That's a lot of pressure.
and what was I going to tell him? But we won anyway.
Oh, you won anyway. Oh, good for you. And you got better, personally got better.
Oh, well, after that, I had no trouble after that. And marching and maneuvering just became second nature. And whenever I'd hear a song, I knew exactly how, what the pace was to be, and there was no problem.
That's great.
And I can still do that.
You can still do that.
When I listen to those, I can still march to.
Maybe I should film you doing that.
No, but like I said, once it becomes part of you, you can't. It never goes away. Of course, I'm glad because it keeps me connected with my youth. Well,
back then, when you were part of it, how did it help you as a person, as a young man?
Well, you had to be, it was military, and you had to follow the rules, and and when the drum major said attention, that's what it was, and you didn't slouch or any of that stuff. You came to attention and you did what he said. And if you didn't, out you went.
Mm-hmm.
So
it taught you discipline.
Yep. Yeah.
Any other ways that you felt it, as you sit here today looking back, that it helped you?
It gave me appreciation of music, of different kinds of music. These chords played the entire range, popular music to classical. and so it gave me and also an appreciation of somebody who could play it. If you want to see sometime, get on the internet and type in the old guard drumming they're not bugles, fife and drum corps.
Okay.
Type it and watch those guys play the drums. You can't believe what they do.
Okay, I will.
I mean, they're just extraordinary, and we weren't at that level. Quite probably 2 levels before that. Our kids could really play. They could play well, but these guys are. I mean, well, they're pros, and they do extraordinary things with those sticks.
So how long were you with Legion Cadets?
I think I got in 1950. I was substituted in 1951, I think, and the Corps ended if I can remember right, I think in 1956, and that's when we.
So you were a member at the end.
Yes.
And what brought on the end of the Legion Cadets?
Well, because there weren't enough people who wanted to continue as a junior corps, and we were not good enough as a senior corps, and that's when the effort was made between the Seneca Chiefs and the Watkins Corps to get together, and so we combined into a single corps.
And who were the Seneca Chiefs?
Montour.
So the same type of
they were a senior
program?
Corps. Yeah.
And who sponsored Seneca Chiefs, do you know?
The fire department.
Or the Montour Falls Fire Department?
Yeah.
So the 2 corps merged into one, the Seneca Chiefs.
Yeah, and after that, it became a kind of a Schuyler County operation. It was still centered there. The leaders of the Corps were from Montour, Pop Confer, and Bud Confer were the primary movers, and so it was Montour centered. But most of the time, a good share of the time, we practiced in Watkins because that's we had the school there and other places, and for practice we would march around the streets.
Were you with the Seneca Chiefs?
Yes, I was with them until I graduated from college, and once I did that and I got a job, it wasn't practical anymore. But I did keep going I did follow them, and I did, and they continued on until the 60s, and they were always a good corps.
You mentioned a couple names, Chuck Calhoun and Carl Isley, and as we all know, they're 2 of the founding fathers of the Squires.
The Squires, yeah.
Did you ever have any involvement with the Squires?
Yes, I was a drum instructor for the Pages.
Nice, okay.
For 2 years, and the 2 years I was the instructor, we won the New York State Championship.
The Pages did?
Yep.
Oh, that's
they were the feeder corps.
For the Squires.
Yeah.
What was the age range in Pages? Do you recall?
8th grade.
Okay.
Unless they got real good, and then they could go into the big corps. Yeah, but my 2 older boys were in it.
Pages or Squires or
in the Pages.
Pages.
But they, when it came time for them to go into the Squires, for some reason they weren't interested. They still followed drum corps, but they just didn't seem interested, and I didn't push them to do it.
So when you were a drum instructor for the Pages, how old were you? Were you in college or
No,
early in your career?
I was teaching up at Odessa.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm going to get the timeline correct here.
My two older boys were in the 7th and 8th grade,
Okay.
so that would have been in the late or the mid 70s.
And what did you teach at Odessa?
History.
In the high school?
Yeah, I was head of the history department.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we won 2 years in a row. Once up at Syracuse, we won up there, and Waverly, we won at Waverly. So, big trophies.
So I find it interesting that so many of the people I've spoken with, the involvement in the drum corps is something that's followed them through their life.
Yeah.
You know, as you say, being an instructor or having that CD in your car really had a big impact on everyone, didn't it?
It did. And like I said, I would go whenever the opportunity. I would go to one of the big competitions. In fact, we had a parade in Norwich, and it was the same night as the competition in Syracuse, the Northeast Pageant of the Drum. And we had an afternoon parade, and Jimmy Angelo and my brother-in-law Jerry Smiter and David Ferboni were riding. In those days, we were going to a drum corps parade. We had to get there ourselves.
Oh.
No bus or
Wow.
anything. We had, so I drove my father's car, and the parade got over. I think at something like 4 or 5 o'clock, and I said, "Okay, boys, in the car, because we're going to that competition." So we hopped in the car, and we got there in time. And what a show we got to see. The Hawthorne Caballeros, who are dressed like caballeros, big flare down. I mean, you have to see these guys. Yeah. And the caballero. But anyway, it was the first time they played Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom. You ever heard that song? Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White?
I don't think so.
I thought the people were going to tear that stadium apart.
It was so well done.
Yeah, and I think they won the competition that night. But there was another one. It was Archer Epler from Philadelphia, and they played The King and I.
Oh, that I know.
Well, they had their drum major was dressed up like Yul Brynner.
Oh, wow.
And they brought him out when they started off the line. They brought him out on the field in a shroud. You couldn't see him. And then he took the shroud, and there he was, bald head and everything. And they put on a real, just amazing.
So you mentioned having to get to the parades yourself. So the younger members, their parents had to drag them?
This was with the Chiefs, not with the cadets. Most of the time, we went by bus.
You did have a bus, okay.
Yeah.
It was just the Chiefs.
Well, it was
older.
because we were teenagers,
right.
But from time to time, in fact, that competition we went to up in Canandaigua, I went with. If the parent was going, then you could ride with them.
Mm-hmm. Fill the car.
Yeah. So, and I went with my friend Dick Moran.
Did your father have any involvement with the Chiefs?
No. Well, indirectly he did. He provided the car for some of the things that they had to do.
Okay.
But
did the American Legion continue any sort of support for the Chiefs?
I don't know.
I wonder.
They probably did.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were always interested in drum corps.
Mm-hmm.
They probably did, but I couldn't say that for sure. Okay. So.
Great. It's a wonderful story.
Well, it was fun.
Yeah, very good.
And I miss it. I miss going to the competitions because the competitions today are not like they were in those days. They all play trumpets and they dance around in the middle of the field, and
Not for your liking.
no, I don't care for what they're doing now. So I get on the internet and on YouTube, and I can get the competitions from the 50s, 60s, and
Past.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
The glory days.
yes.
Thank you very, very much.
Well, you're welcome. It was fun.